actually, this brings to mind. I saw your interview with Iraqi Nutrition, and there you talked about training frequency. And what, in your opinion, how does that kind of dovetails into what we just talked about now?
Well, so if you want good results, not just okay results, and if you want the best results, you're going to have to take training frequency into consideration. Now, from the perspective of sports science, with the total variables that affect hypertrophy and strength outcomes, frequency is one of the lesser ones. Training with just once a week, but with the same equivalent weekly volume as splitting that volume up over 4 training sessions through the week, gives you such similar results that many of the studies that have been done, they don't show a difference. Now, there's some difference in effect size, but a lot of it's not statistically significant. So frequency is not a huge deal, which was funny when the whole squat every day thing came out. And, you know, there's religious proponents of almost every philosophy. And so when the squat every day thing came out, people were like, you don't understand. Either you squat every day, you're the stupidest person ever. Like, it'll give you these amazing results. They're just so cool. It's so great. It's just so awesome. And you're like, okay, you probably get very similar results training twice a week, or 3 times a week, or even once a week, okay? Now, that being said, most exercises, most movements that are not super technical like the Olympic weightlifting movements, it's probably best to train them between 2 and 4 times a week, or overloading training between 2 and 4 times a week. Can you train them more than that, but not every session is overloading? Yes. That may afford you some more technical practice. For movements like bodybuilding movements and stuff, you don't really need technical practice. It's not a big deal. Maybe a waste of your time. For Olympic weightlifting and things of that nature, you need a lot of technical practice, so you're going to be doing some version of Olympic weightlifting, some kind of derivative lift or the full lift. Man, you could be doing it 6 days a week, or every single session that you come in. But generally speaking, 2 to 4 times a week is a real good zone for most people to get their best results. I'll put you another way. If someone trains every single muscle group overloaded 6 times a week, I start to think they could probably get better results if they didn't do that, if they trained less. In most cases, I think that's true. On the other hand, if I see someone that does the bro split, you're familiar with the bro split, chest Monday, back Tuesday, then I know that they're missing out on something. Now, are they missing out on just this world of benefits? No. So I usually don't, when people ask me how to train, if they do a bro split, I usually don't say much about it. I say, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Now, if they want to compete, if they want to get better and they're stalling, that's the first thing that comes to mind is you train your chest once a week. They're like, yes, like try twice a week. Do the same stuff you're doing now, split it into 2 sessions, and you'll find out your recovery is so much better that you could probably do even more work and still recover. So there's definitely something to be said for frequency, 2 to 4 times a week for most muscle groups, etc. And there's definitely exceptions to that at the extremes, but on average, that's probably where I'd start with the program design.
Right, and so let's say someone is training their chest, just because chest is obviously the most important body part in the world. I'm just kidding. But let's say you do 20 sets for your chest a week. Now, if you were to distribute that in 2 or 3 sessions versus doing it every single day, so three sets every day, 7 days a week, in terms of hypertrophy and in terms of connective tissue health and fatigue management, how do you think the situation would turn out?
The situation is for a short-term hypertrophy would probably be identical. For long-term hypertrophy, I would predict that the high-frequency training would lag behind. And here's why. And Greg Nuckols has written about this a bit more extensively. I always seem to every fucking podcast I ever have, I refer to Greg Nuckols. Just don't even bother having me on. Just have Greg on instead. So there is some good reason to believe that really homeostatically disruptive single sessions that generate a lot of delayed onset muscle soreness, really disrupt things, are the best way to get satellite cell proliferation. So the best way to get satellite cells attracted to the main myofiber and to actually have an expansion of the myonuclear domain. Because regular hypertrophy probably doesn't require that, but that runs its course after you have a nucleus and you have all the muscle that surrounds it, and this muscle grows, and sooner or later the nucleus can't really talk to the rest of the muscle, so it stops growing. So you need to add nuclei from satellite cells so they can continue to get bigger. That whole addition, that conventional hypertrophy, that may not require, it just probably requires a certain amount of weekly volume close to your MRV. I mean, each session doesn't probably necessarily need to be super disruptive, but probably for ascending to the next level of getting nuclei to add in, I think it's probably a good idea to train really hard every now and again. And if you split your bench volume up enough, no session's really that overloading, and your body kind of just goes, benching happens all the time. I'm really used to it, whatever. So I think that in the short term, that kind of approach is fine. In the long term, I would say a slightly contracted training frequency, at least for periods of time, is a good idea. Now, nothing like a once a week, but I think twice a week, 3 times a week, so you can get really fucked up and recover. On the other hand, I'm really glad you brought connective tissue health. Benching every day or doing chest every day means that if you have a nagging little micro tear in one of your tendons, it's not going to go well for you. You're going to continue to aggravate. And if you're strong enough, it's going to fuck you over really quick, which is why people who advocate for really high frequency training, almost none of them are very strong. You get strong enough, you start benching 200 kilos. Do you know one person that benches 200 kilos for max and does a pressing movement every day? Because I don't know a single one. Why? I mean, Olympic weightlifters are all, a bunch of them are that strong in other lifts, and they do all kinds of lifts every day. But it's the nature of the very, just the same muscle groups getting hit every single day in the same way, probably not a good idea when you get really strong. So I would say there are ways around it. You could probably do pushing every day. You might be able to do, Monday is more of a flat pressing and chest oriented push. Tuesday would be more of an incline pressing and triceps oriented push. And if you alternate those day, that's better. But generally speaking, I think that from fatigue management, especially chronic injury, a lower training frequency is probably a good idea. Because like if you go to 1 day a week of training, you could probably get injured every week and still recover for next week because it's such a long interval, right? Now that's a really stupid way to train because you don't grow muscle for that long, right? You just use most of the week to recover instead of grow. There is probably a middle ground most of the time. So I think extreme perspectives on frequency suffer from the idea that most people won't be able to survive them. And again, reference to Greg Nuckols, he's got this whole Bulgarian manual or whatever that he wrote, or just to be a high frequency training. And so pretty much the first thing in it is like, don't ever train like this for extended periods of time. 6 to 8 weeks, high frequency, and then you're going to get fucking beat up and you're not going to be able to keep going. So go back to normal frequency so you can heal up so that you can do high frequency later. I think that's a very good approach. I think the big problem came several years ago when people just squat every day and all this stuff. People like high frequency training is how you train all the time. Good luck. You get strong enough, you're going to start to get hurt.
Right. Although, again, and it might be, again, a shallow response, that's why I'm bringing it up, because I'm curious what you will say, but proponents of high-frequency training will say to that it is because you don't take into account volume. So you don't equate volume between the two groups. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm equating volume. My entire discussion is based on equating volume. I've been an exercise researcher for a long time. I don't even know how to have a discussion without equated volume. So even if volume is equated, frequency has some unique characteristics. There is such a thing as too much frequency for the best outcomes in the long term. And there's definitely such a thing as too little frequency. If I had to train someone with either very much frequency or very little, I'd probably err on the side of very much. But, some of the biggest people in the world, as a matter of fact, almost all of them train pretty low frequency. We can't just say they're wrong because they're still bigger than all of us. And a lot of times people have been doing stuff for a long time. It's because it actually works really well. So, it's high frequency proponents have the kind of the backstop is that very few people actually do high frequency training that are any good. And that is an argument. It is definitely an argument because the science is largely equivocal on many of these things. And now we have to look to the real world. People say, well, it's all about squatting every day. Who the fuck is squatting every day that's strong? There's like 2 guys, right? Everyone else doesn't do it. A bunch of people have tried and got hurt. I've seen it myself. So definitely some considerations, even for volume equated. Now, that being said, a lot of people make really stupid comparisons to high frequency training. You'll say, hey man, so you bench once a week, and be like, yeah, I do chest once a week. Why don't you do it twice a week? They'd be like, I'll never be able to recover from that. What I don't mean is that you just double your workout. You have to cut your workout in half and then spread it out. And they're like, oh, okay, right? So there's definitely some critiques about high frequency training that just completely obviate that. But I do think it's important to note that, yeah, even volume equated, super high frequency runs into some real world problems every now and again.